All right, good morning guys. This morning we got a 4R75E transmission, also 4R75W, similar to the 4R70 before it. Typically 2004 and up. They have the middle speed sensor in the case here for the composite shell. 04 to 07, even up to 08 has a hard wire harness inside. 09 and up, E model has a soft wire harness inside. Really similar to overhaul. They're in a lot of Econoline vans, really small, crappy tranny, not really enough transmission for those big vans. E250s, E350s, also in F150s. So really common transmission. We build a ton of them here. This will be a little crash course, just kind of quick assembly. I've sub-assembled some stuff, done some Sonnax upgrades on the valve body. One of the big upgrades on this transmission is to ream the overdrive servo bore. We use the Sonnax reamer. I believe Northland has one too. But right there in that case, that servo bore, we ream it out and sleeve it. Whenever you take them apart, they're really wobbly. I think it's just bad quality aluminum they're using anymore these days. But you can use an old servo pin right here. Always put it in your case. You can check the wobble. Shouldn't have any wobble to it. They can have a little bit. This one's already been reamed and sleeved, but that can contribute to burn up overdrive bands, direct clutch problems. There's release oil for third gear in there. So always ream that case out. Sonnax makes a pin with an O-ring on it you can use if they're not really that worn or you don't have a reamer kit, but you always need to address that bore. But we'll get it going here and just kind of give you a quick assembly on the 4R75E. All right, so we got the case all in place there. This unit is known to just eat up Torrington bearings, cause clearance issues, damage the planetary gear, the sun gears. Start first with the case Torrington. I got it popped apart. These are pitted more often than not, so typically you'll want to replace that bearing if it's pitted. If it looks okay, you can snap it back together. There she is back together. Put that in the case. You can also replace this bushing down in the case. If those wear out, they can actually re-groove the back of the case. So another issue there to deal with. Once you get the case washed too, put the snap ring back in. This is the rest for the band. Actually, first you want to put the ring gear in, I'm sorry. If you ever change the gear train, because a lot of times these things are exploded, make sure you match up your ring gear. The later ones like this have no holes in it, as in early ones have holes, and it will affect the tone ring for the speed sensor and cause speedometer issues. So this one is the later one, 04 and up. You want to put that in there. I already got my new rings on here, ceiling rings. You want to watch this snap ring. Typically you can know to break a chunk off of it and it'll jam in the back of the case. On this side, I have the new ceiling rings for the direct clutch drum. I have a tool here, which is actually the remnants of a broken direct drum. You can kind of take snap ring pliers, expand the rings and work them over by hand, and then take your fingers and squeeze them back in. Then get this install tool on there. I try to get this stuff on there first so it can set up, get the rings back in place so that they don't tear when we put it together. So basically, got the rings setting up in there. Put the output shaft back on the ring gear. Get your snap ring in place. It's a wave snap ring. Now I also take and shave a little bit off the end of this on a sander. There's some bulletins about the shaft being a little too long and it can bind against the slip yoke when these vans are overloaded, and then it can cause extra stress on the Torrington bearings inside. So I shave a little bit off of there. Probably should take a little more, but just some insurance. Then you want to take and lube up your ceiling rings. Again, I use 90 weight. Kind of lube up the surface where the bushing rides. Turn it around, get it in the case there. Down all the way. Just be careful putting it down. You don't want to break one of those metal ceiling rings. Now you can put your rest snap ring in there for your band. That just kind of rests down there in the bottom. All it does is balance the reverse band. Another common issue on these vans, reverse bands. Snap this lug off here. You'll see when they start wearing and wear the material away. No reverse when that breaks, another common failure. So got your new band laid in there, and then when it's in place correctly, you can put a pick through here, activate it. So next, you're going to want to build your direct drum. These are another common issue. I want to take your little intermediate shaft here, check the spline wear in it. You can flip it over, look for sealing ring or seal problems there where the sealing rings ride. It takes a lip seal in there. This little one right here. Skirt goes down. Always take a pick here and work it on. And as you spin the drum, get it down in place. And then take a pick here and just kind of work upward, make sure the skirt's kind of turned outward. So that's all good. Take your piston, always smack it. Make sure this little check ball is loose. Check the inside of this for any big wear. You can Scotch Brite that if there's just a little bit of wear in there. Get your new lip seal on here with the skirt going downward. Put a little grease in here. Lube this lip seal. And then that one. Take my trusty lip seal knife, kind of rest it in there, and you just lightly kind of spin it around and finesse it. Get that skirt kind of down into the chamfer. Boom, just like that. Got her down in place. You never want to force or muscle those. Lip seals take a while to get used to and get good at. You don't want to tear it or cut it, then you have a leak. Taking it back apart. So we got your return spring snap ring. You're gonna go put it in the foot press, which you really need a foot press to do these. You might be able to figure a way to do it without, but it'd be a nightmare. So there's your snap ring. I've already popped this Torrington apart, it looks good. These are another one that's known to go bad. So put a little grease on it, put on the back of the drum, put a little grease in here for the sealing rings. So then you want to put your spacer in here. This indentation goes down to help keep the snap ring in place. This Torrington, also always open it. These are known to pit. Basically all three of these Torringtons, the case one, the two direct drum ones, and then also the ones on the Planet, are just notorious for pitting, just getting ground into nothing. You'll pull the pan and it'll leave just full of metal. Okay, so you got that in there. Don't forget your direct clutch hub in here. Lay that in there. And then you can start putting your direct clutches and steels in. You can also put that hub in after you do the clutches, but it's kind of hard sometimes to finagle it in there. So I just put it over the hub as you're building it. Okay, got that in place. So you want to get your snap ring here. I always pull them out a little bit. Smack it on the bench. And then you can kind of feel your clearance of that clutch. These clutches are a little sloppy. You can tighten it up with the thicker snap ring, but this one's probably about 60 thousandths. You don't want to go too tight because there's a spec and it can affect the way the shift is, the plier or the release. So now you can take your tool out, put your drum in here. So you got your direct drum in place. And now you can give it an air check. So down here in the bottom of the case, it's the feed hole on the left. Just hit it with some air. Apply that clutch, simulate oil. Air check's good. So now you're gonna grab your planetary. It's right here. We got a new bushing in here. You got to be careful because these can get ground up and worn down if there's planetary failures, bearing problems. Try to feel that bearing in there. Just one big planet is all this unit has. Then you want to get your sprag in place. Just lay it in there. Get your drum down in there. There, hear that? She's down all the way. Now what I'll do next is put in the reverse band servo. Kind of grease the bore up there. Now you always want to check these servo pistons. This rubber is nice and soft. They're notorious for getting hard and brittle, almost hard like plastic. So you want to replace these. Same with this cover. Even the new ones on these, the rubber's pretty hard, but always check or replace these. Now this one has 3 lines in it. There's different lengths of these pins for applying the band and getting a better engagement. A lot of the later ones have a 3-ring. I've used the 2-ring in place of it when these are on back order. So just be mindful of that. They have a 1-ring also. So get your return spring on there. Get a little bit of lube on there. So you can put it in there so you can apply the band and kind of get a test check on it. This is where I get my snap ring ready on my hammer handle. Make sure you put this in right. It even says outside on the cover, so you can't really mess it up, but you'd be surprised some of the units we tear down that people tried to build that don't know and cause more problems than they fix. So basically put that in there, carefully get your hammer handle, apply it, push it in enough to get your snap ring in. Here, that's in place. Always look around there, make sure it's in the groove. You can even take a little screwdriver, tap it in the groove. You don't want a servo to blow out and have an issue. So next we put in the center support. Look at these, they're always notorious to get wear as they kind of beat in the case. Get these lugs beat up. Some have a big ledge on all of them. This one looks really good, so be mindful of that. You can get some hard, clunky engagements when those are worn out. There's an anti-rattle clip we'll put in place, but when they're really worn out, the rattle clip just doesn't work as effective. So when you put this in, you got to clock this hole over here to the overdrive band strut lug, and then you have an opening here for your middle speed sensor. So you lay it down in there, and the easiest way I've found to put this all down, you grab your sun gear and both your sun gears and shell assembly here, place it in here. There you go. Spin it, pops it down into place. Take your center support, pull it towards the left side of the case. Grab your anti-rattle clip, typically just like that. This part can be a little bit of a pain, but basically you start one end of it, push it in there with your finger, and just tap it down just enough. You still want it to kind of have tension so that when that support moves, it kind of spring tension against it, so it keeps it smooth on the engagements there. One big mistake guys make on these, because on the earlier models it doesn't matter when they just have the 1 speed sensor in the bottom, but since there's 2 speed sensors here, you want to keep the opening of the snap ring in the speed sensor hole. So put this part right here, get that in place. See, now you can still put your speed sensor hole in. I've seen guys build these and then you go to put it in, you can't get the speed sensor in, you take the whole unit back apart. So that's in place. What you can do now, you can reach down or turn it up, spin your output shaft, a little bit of in and out clearance, that looks good. They also make a heavy duty snap ring of these, I believe Superior. So that's all good to go there. I've already checked my sun gear, make sure none of these are pitted or chipped up. It's good to put new bushings in the sun gear. Check this Torrington for any pitting. You can see the sun shell has a little bit of wear on it from the prior bearing failure. It'll be fine. Check these tangs in here. The reverse drum can kind of beat into notches into them. This one's fine. This is a composite shell. So basically 04 and newer use this shell. It's non-magnetic. The earlier ones use a magnetic shell. If you interchange this stuff, you'll get incorrect speed readings, problems. So make sure if it has a composite shell in it, you have to put the correct one in. Okay, so that's in there, right? I always put the transmission in park. It will make it easy to put in the reverse and forward drum. You got another Torrington here. You want to pop it apart, check it. Forward clutch hub, it's got a Torrington that rests in here. Pop it apart, check it. Intermediate shaft. Okay, so now you're in park. It's going to help put those drums down. All right, so the reverse drum here, got a couple things you'll want to do and look at. There's 2 seals down in there. I have it sub-assembled. This return spring is known to crack and break. If it's so, you want to replace it. Then you also have a Torrington bearing here. That goes in the reverse drum. Now you'll have to be careful if you lay these bearings out in order. The case bearing has a little bit bigger skirt on it that goes in the bottom of the case. The reverse drum one has no skirt, it just goes inward. A big mistake guys make is they put this bearing in the bottom of the case and they put the case bearing on the reverse drum. So it'll all assemble, and then when you go to bolt the pump in, it'll make a pop, cracking sound. And it's that bearing cracking the ledge on it. So you got to take it apart, get the bearing in there correct. So I suggest lay everything out in order. If you've never done it before, you're going to limit more problems from happening. Because again, all it takes is one wrong move. So many parts in a transmission, you know, even if you assemble it right, there can be a problem. So you want to try to limit any issue you can have. Okay, so reverse drum, clutch is in place there. These are a little sloppy like the direct clutch. That is completely normal. I've seen guys try to tighten them up, but reverse engagements are just fine. Look at the tangs on this drum. They can get big notches beat into them against that sun shell. This is your sprag. Turns to the left, blocks to the right. Another problem 470s, 75s have is this snap ring. You'll take it apart, it'll be bent, popping off or off of there. Throw that away. You want to put the Sonnax updated spiral snap ring in place. Part number, I believe, is 74948 RK, I believe. But it uses kind of a washer here, and then you have a spiral snap ring. You basically take the spiral, start it, and work it around the drum. Always want to put one of these in. So now she's on there. Take a screwdriver, go around it like 6 times, and just knock that over so it can't come off. So that's in place there. Always make sure the surface is good for your overdrive band. You can have a little bit of heat marks. You can take a straight edge, make sure it's flat. You don't want it dished and seared really bad. Okay. So, got my forward drum here. Earlier I put the new sealing rings on. You don't need a special tool, but you take your new sealing rings, take a snap ring pliers, just expand them a bit, and then I use a pick, kind of work them down into their grooves, take my fingers and kind of squeeze them back in, and then I use the stator here as a tool to size them. So I've been letting them set up just like I did the direct clutch while I've been doing other stuff. So here, this one, all right, so now we are to the forward clutch drum. Another issue these units have, they will break this groove out of the forward clutch drum, the snap ring groove. They make a billet steel updated drum. You can press your shaft into it. That's the best upgrade to do. Right here we have our piston. Got the new lip seals on there. So when that snap ring groove breaks, it'll overextend this piston, cut the lip seals, typically cause slipping in first gear or no first. You got to rev it up to get it to go. Usually a P0731 first gear ratio code. You'll explain to customers what that is and they'll think it's a solenoid, but it's actually a broken drum. So rest your piston in there, take your lip seal knife, same thing, lightly go around the inside with just a little bit of tension on your fingers, then the outside. You got part of it in there. Again, just finesse, boom, she's in place. Got your return spring, retainer, snap ring. We'll go put this in the foot press. So we got her all in place there. Take a screwdriver, make sure that snap ring's in all the way. And then now, you're gonna wanna put your forward clutch together. So, here you got your wave plate. What these waves do are Belleville springs, make a smooth engagement when you put it in drive, so it kind of makes it slowly clamp the clutch on instead of a fast, aggressive apply. So we got steel and a clutch. Got some high energy clutches in here. Okay. And we'll get our snap ring in. Smack it on the bench. Feel your clearance. Another sloppier clutch pack. These 470s are set up pretty sloppy, but that just comes on when you put it in drive. So that clearance is fine right there. Again, there's things you can do to snug it up a bit, but this is just a basic assembly for you. Then you'll put your reverse drum all the way over your forward drum till it bottoms out. Take some pliers here, grab the assembly. Make sure your tranny's in park, and then you'll work it on. You know it's down all the way when you can pick up a bit. It sounds solid. You can see the reverse drum tanged into the sun shell. Everything looks down good. Get your new overdrive band here. Get it on one side on that anchor. These overdrive servo pistons are best to replace if they get any wobble in the pin where it goes in the piston. Make sure this spring isn't broken. Make sure this rubber bonded piston here is soft and looks okay, it's not scratched up. You want to put your return spring on here. One of the most important things, replace your overdrive snap ring for the servo. These are notorious to break little eyelets off, and then they'll jam the 3/4 shift valve open. So customers will say that they'll put it into, when it goes to overdrive, it just neutralizes. So basically, replace the snap ring, make sure the valve body isn't stuck. Big problem that they have. So here I'm gonna lube this up. Gonna get my snap ring over my hammer handle. Gotta move this over. Basically, gotta take a pick here. Get the band up over the pin of the servo. This one takes a good amount of force and good snap ring pliers. So you wanna compress that snap ring, pull, push in. There, we got her in there. Take a screwdriver, make sure that's okay. So now we got the band in place. Check your clearance on it right there. Make sure it's in. All right, next step. Okay, so we got your band in place there. Once again, make sure it's got clearance there. That looks good. So then you'll have your intermediate clutch for second gear. Put your pressure plate down. And clutch. Steel, clutch. Steel, clutch. Another steel and clutch. So yeah, intermediate for the 1-2 shift. So typically when you have good clearance, you have just a little step down there between this case and that steel. Put your return spring in there. Made some little dowels here for putting, aligning your pump. Get those in there. Don't forget your pump gasket. All right, and then we have our pump body. I already put the new bushing and seal in here. Typically the groove of that bushing will go in the lube channel right here. Put your new O-ring on here. Then you'll have your intermediate servo piston. Same thing, look around this, make sure it's pretty soft. They're not the softest rubber, even when they're new. Make sure your check ball's not stuck. Take and lube this one up. Lock it right there. Just push it down all the way. You want to take your pump gears, make sure that they're not all scored up. You'll see a chamfer right here that goes into the hub of the converter. Basically the flat side stays upward here. You want to put the chamfer down. So big problems if you do that wrong, so make sure you get that pump gear in right. Always lube it up. Make sure you got good lube inside your pump gears. You don't want a cold fire with no lube. Okay, there's that there. So now you'll go onto your stator, make sure your bushings look good, the surface of your pump's good. You got your two metal sealing rings we got on here, and then the 75 W and E uses these plastic rings here. For the upper two, I always kind of bend those in a little bit, make sure they hug the part they're going on. So you got your 4 rings on there, pump washer. Take and glue that on there. Pretty easy, there's a little spot to index it. And then you want to assemble your pump. Only bolts in one way. Sometimes it's just hard to find the bolts in the basket here, where we've laid them all out. Okay, so you got those in there. Pump together. I'm going to put some lube around those sealing rings. And then your O-ring, you want to lube that up really good too. Okay, so now we just line up that hole there. Only bolts in one way, but makes it easier to put down. So I'll take your hammer handle until she's down. Now you want to get your pump bolts, lay them all out here. Get a little bit of Loctite, just put a little dab on them. I believe the torque spec on these is about 18 foot-pounds. what you'll probably want to do first, take a speed handle, slightly bolt it down, make sure that your input shaft's going to spin there. Just tighten a couple, make sure it spins both ways, feels good. And now you can go around and tighten all of them. And you're going to go around and torque them. Okay. And check it again. Good. So now you can take it, tilt it up. Good clearance. Take it out apart. Spins both ways. That ratcheting sounds normal. That's Sprag freewheeling. At this point, you can kind of look over anything. Flatten any burrs there from taking your snap ring out. So now you want to put your screen in the case here. This is your pressure control solenoid. It's good to take these out and test them, put new O-rings on them or replace them. You'd have to pull this little roll pin here and take this nut loose, pull the shift shaft out, then you can take out your EPC. So next, we'll get my direct accumulator piston here. These are another one. Make sure they're nice and soft, no scoring on them. Make sure the bore looks good. You want to put some more lube on this one. And then you just want to take some snap ring pliers and very lightly finesse it in the case. So that's good there. You don't want to roll it. Got your return spring there. And then you have this little hat here. Basically, this tit has to go upward. Guys think it goes down is wrong. Incorrect. It goes just like this. So put that in place there. Then you can do your 1-2 accumulator. Big spring goes down first. In a sec, I'll have to find that piston. Might be in the wash. And then for your extension housing, the earlier units use this one with the little red adhesive in it. This one takes the green one. The 475E typically takes this gasket. You can't really mess them up. And then you want to take your housing here and make sure there's no gasket on it or anything. Get it cleaned up. Check this bushing in here. We'll replace it. And you want to put your new seal in right here. Kind of have a little tool here to put them in. That's good there. Then get your housing all bolted in. This one uses a stud on one side. Whoops. Okay, so the 1-2 accumulator, I'll go get my accumulator piston. This double spring goes on top. Some models use just a single spring. Same with this rubber, make sure it's nice and soft and looks good. You have to get that snap ring back down in the case. Usually use my hammer handle, push down on it. Valve body wise, I'll show you guys right here. Most common things we do, they have some valve body issues. I'll show you the Sonnax parts we use. So basically, right here, overdrive servo regulator, this little tiny valve here, it wears this little bore. There's a little sleeve in there. 76 948 29K. It's a drop-in valve. Now this valve right behind it's the 3/4 shift valve. That is typically where the little chunk of the overdrive servo snap ring will go down, stick this valve open. So typically you have to use a little pocket screwdriver, open this. You'll see a chunk in there you got to take out with a magnet or a pick or an air blower. So make sure that's not stuck. That will cause a neutralization on the 3/4 shift. The other valves we do, now on vans, sometimes these can make the shifts a little bumpy, but we like them, especially when they're loaded down. It's an elevated PR valve and spring. So it's a drop-in valve right here. It comes with a stiffer spring and a valve with better grooves cut into it to dissipate the oil. These bores wear, they get scratched up, can cause delayed engagements also. Fine metal gets in them, they stick. So this PR valve, the Sonnax number for the elevated PR valve, 76 948 12K, it basically comes with a valve and spring. This is my old one. The new one's black in color and has a stiffer spring. And then the valve that goes on the outboard is the reverse boost valve. They also wear that little valve in there. Replace that. That's 76 948 02K. And then the TCC one right here is also known to wear. You can take that one out and check the bore in there. Sonnax makes that one too. And another important one here is the solenoid regulator valve right here. The Sonnax makes a boring tool for it. So if you take the old valve out and run your bore through it, clean these lands up. The part number is 76 948 14K, and you get your new valve in there, new spring. And then after that, basically you got your valve body gaskets. If you get the correct kit, the 475 kit, 75W and E, you can't mess it up. There's only one bottom gasket, but you'll want to watch if you get the earlier kit, which usually has both gaskets. Your lower gasket here has one feed hole that could be blocked if you have the earlier 03 and older gasket on it. So you want to make sure you have the right one. Typically, if it says 1WP is the later one, and then the X series one is the older one. So make sure you get those right. And other than that, once you get your valve body back on there, wire harness and filter, good to go.